I recently had a call from a private lifestyle club wondering if a vacant warehouse space would work for their business. Now, I'm not sure what that is exactly, but it prompted me to look back on other non-traditional industrial uses I've come across, and in this video, I'll share some of the more interesting ones and also include some comments about to watch for if you're an owner or a broker. I'll start with a few businesses that aren't necessarily crazy, but still not what might come to mind when thinking of industrial tenants. The first one was the tenant in the first investment property my partner and I bought, and that was a kitchen equipment repair company. They were basically who restaurants called when a piece of kitchen equipment broke down. They would try repairing it on site, but if it was too complex, they would bring it back to their shop and work on it there. The space was filled to the rafters with parts and miscellaneous equipment in various states of repair. Incidentally, there's a building just down the street where the tenant was in the arcade game repair business. Similar concept, only their space was filled with 50 or so arcade games in various states of repair. I like bringing up these examples whenever I get asked the question, who's leasing all of this space? Well, the short answer is that while large distribution and logistics companies, 3PLs, and manufacturers occupy a lot of the inventory, there are also countless small and medium businesses that have all sorts of different businesses. Kitchen equipment and arcade repair companies are perfect examples of just how broad the industrial real estate landscape truly is. Beyond kitchen equipment and arcade games, think of all the things that need to be repaired, and somewhere there's a company occupying an industrial building specifically for that purpose. But there are even more uses that might be surprising to find in an industrial building. Here's a flex building I own with a few partners that has several examples. It's a building with industrial zoning, but it happens to have direct exposure to a main road. So after we completed an extensive renovation, we leased one space to a flower shop and another space to a furniture store. These two tenants added to the existing tenant base of a hot tub store, an equestrian store, and another tenant who's 100% office. Now on to even some more interesting uses, and as a quick note, I have a few tips at the end on how to work with these types of groups. One use that has grown in popularity are indoor participation groups. I've leased industrial spaces to indoor soccer fields, karate studios, children's play areas, and rock climbing. It goes beyond that as well, as I've seen trampoline parks, volleyball and pickleball courts, escape rooms, and even an axe throwing space that had a dedicated anger room to smash random things at will. These uses require some extra due diligence, of course, but they might be worth considering. Another unconventional use that is actually quite common are churches. I have to warn you in advance that getting a church deal done might involve a divine help from God, as there tends to be an ungodly amount of decision makers combined with a lot of red tape at the municipal level. You might even hear from landlords or brokers that refuse to deal with church groups for these reasons. I, on the other hand, look to cut the wheat from the chaff and look for groups that have a strong chance of doing a deal, and as a result, I've successfully leased and sold industrial properties to a handful of churches. The next challenging and unique use is a doggy daycare. Now, I love dogs, but I hate doggy daycares. I've walked through a number of buildings that either had a doggy daycare in the space or one next door, and there are two inherent problems: the putrid smell and the incessant noise. Consider for a moment how difficult it'll be releasing the space down the road when the prospective groups are looking at the space in these conditions. Personally, I would never lease to a doggy daycare, nor would I take one on as a client. Coincidentally, Deren Huang put out a post recently about some of the weirdest tenants he has in his portfolio, so let's flip through those quickly as well. First is a crematory manufacturer. Definitely not a use that would come to most people's mind, but again, someone has to make these things. Next, he has a hummus distributor in one of his spaces who also installed a large cooler. Then he has a jiu-jitsu studio, which again, these are surprisingly quite common. And Deren also mentions pickleball as a rapidly growing industry. Just so happens that Deren's coming on my podcast next week to talk about building his industrial real estate portfolio. I'll leave a link to that below as well. Now, any one of these tenants can theoretically work, but before doing any of these deals, there's a few things I'd really recommend. First, check to see if the zoning allows for that type of use in the first place. No sense wasting your time or the tenant's time if that use isn't legally permissible. Even if it is a permitted use under the zoning, I'd still have any lease agreement subject or conditional to the tenant obtaining all relevant licenses and permits. It's typically the tenant's responsibility, but it can become quite messy for both parties if there's an issue discovered after the fact, so I think it's better to deal with it proactively. Next, factor in the parking, as these unique groups often have much higher demands for customer parking. Even beyond parking, take into account how compatible they will be with other tenants. A term often used in retail is the tenant mix, and anytime a non-traditional industrial use is being considered, it's never a bad idea to give consideration to the other tenants as well. As part of doing some additional due diligence, as I mentioned earlier, I'd also check with your insurance provider to see if any of the proposed uses present any challenges with your coverage. A few years ago, a 19-year-old jumped into a foam pit at a trampoline park, broke his neck, and was left a quadriplegic. Terribly sad story, and naturally, it has some major insurance implications with it as well. And of course, this underscores the importance of having your lawyer involved early in the process. Not only will they be instrumental in drafting and negotiating the lease agreement, they might bring up any concerns or issues that you hadn't even thought about. Industrial real estate works best when you have a trusted team of advisors, all working in your best interest. And lastly, let me know in the comments if you've ever come across any interesting or unique businesses. And also let me know what you think a private lifestyle club is. Thanks for watching, catch you in the next video. But still, what we might not think about when it comes to...